Equity in Service Delivery. The United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. Hello, my name is Keenan McKenley, and for my final presentation for PAD 732, Equity and Public Policy, I'll be discussing HUD's role in equitable housing for refugees and immigrants in the United States. Housing inequity among refugees and immigrants in the United States remains a persistent equity challenge. Newly arrived individuals, those being recently arrived refugees, immigrants, and even asylum seekers, face financial, linguistic, and cultural barriers that limit access to stable housing. Additionally, issues such as systemic discrimination, inadequacies in policy framework, and inconsistent enforcement of fair housing laws continue to exacerbate these inequities to access for affordable housing that is safe and inclusive. So aside from the overview of HUD and the inequities that are placed upon refugees, newly arrived immigrants, and asylees with respect to housing, we're going to discuss the insights from the HUD Equity Audit. This audit highlights HUD's strengths, including its equity commitment and accessibility framework. Disparities persist, however, due to systemic discrimination, regulatory cost barriers, and limited enforcement capacity. Now, HUD's programs, such as the Fair Housing Act and the Community Engagement Toolkit, are both crucial. However, they do require consistent funding and monitoring to ensure that equity is in practice. So it's there, but it does require a little bit of work. And so next we're going to talk about the actual equity tools in practice. So this is really fun, you guys, because this is going to be talking about how we're actually going to implement equity and ensuring that refugees, immigrants, asylum seekers, these people are guaranteed equitable and good housing solutions. So right off the bat, we have the Equity Impact Assessment. This evaluates how housing policies affect marginalized communities in the United States. Next, we have our Logic Model. This connects staff to activities including community engagement, enforcement, and outcomes, increased equity, trust, and inclusion. So really just a whole bunch of stuff. Really fun. Last, we have the Stakeholder Map. And this is going to identify HUD's local housing authorities, NGO, and affected communities as key partners driving systemic change. So they're going to look at various NGOs. They're going to identify HUD, local offices around you, to see how they can best serve you. And now this is really important. I'm talking about community engagement and cultural responsiveness. I mean, we can preach about equitable housing all we want. However, unless we're actually out there in the community speaking to representatives, nothing's going to get done. And I mean, this is where this part is really important and plays a key role. So first, HUD's programs emphasize outreach through the Community Engagement Toolkit. The Tenant Education and Outreach Program and partnerships with local organizations as well. So these are a few different programs utilizing outreach in order to get that message out into the community. We're also going to take a look at cultural responsiveness and how that remains critical within HUD, ensuring diverse voices influence program design, and that intake processes respect different identities and family structures. And so this is when you're doing that intake with that family. This is when you're going to want to get to know them, understanding important cultural practices, language, um, religion. This all plays a key role. Major strengths and concerns, right? So, I mean, like with anything, we're going to have the good, we're going to have the bad, strengths and concerns. Our first strength is that explicit equity commitment under the 2023 Action Plan. Now, this is really important because under this plan, this is HUD's commitment to guaranteeing their commitment to equity with respect to providing housing solutions. Next, the robust legal accessibility framework. Because HUD is a government organization, a government entity, there is an expansive legal framework and protections which can be afforded to recipients of HUD. Lastly, transparent eligibility and appeals process. And this is really important and really cool because this gives clients of HUD and people looking for affordable housing the opportunity to appeal the process if they don't get it the first time, really make their case as to why and show HUD why they need that housing. And then we're going to go on to the concerns. Persistent systemic discrimination and appraisal bias. And I mean, realistically, these applications, these interviews, these are being done by real people, and real people have flaws. A lot of the discrimination and appraisal biases that have gone on historically throughout HUD have been dealt with and are continued to be dealt with. However, these are still a concern. There is limited FHEO capacity for compliant resolution, and lastly, regulatory burdens that inflate housing costs for vulnerable groups. As housing increases in the United States, not just for refugees, not just for asylum seekers, but for all of us, people with limited income, health concerns, this is going to make it harder. Upon doing my research, I decided or came across 5 policy recommendations for the agency. Number 1 being that they expand funding and staffing for the Office of Fair Housing and Equitable Opportunity. And this will help expedite civil rights investigations. Next, number 2, we want to strengthen partnerships with resettlement agencies to create dedicated refugee and immigrant housing programs. As someone who personally works in refugee resettlement, I understand the need of creating that partnership with our local HUD office. A lot of our clients, that's one of their first priorities upon coming to the United States, is securing adequate, affordable housing. Number 3, we want to modernize fair housing data systems to track inadequacies more effectively. So as technology gets better, as systems improve, we want to make sure that we're moving with the times, we're revamping those systems. 4, reduce regulatory barriers to affordable housing construction. And 5, establish federal guidance for culturally responsive housing practices. As I've learned and grown my knowledge of equity within the context of public policy, there has been an evolution. I've realized that equity within the context of public policy must be thoughtfully discussed and implemented by our leaders, by federal agencies, by thoughtful legislation to best serve and guide individuals toward success. Prior to this course, I assumed that it was just given that there would be equitable practices in all sorts of legislation for all. However, understanding historically that's not the case, and even today, and understanding not only historical barriers, however, modern day barriers that are driving this. It's important that thoughtful debate, discussion, and implementation of how we can best serve these vulnerable groups of people is best discussed. How will I continue fighting for equitable solutions, not just for housing, with respect to refugees, immigrants, and asylum seekers, but in all contexts? As someone who's made it their mission working with these people, I understand the importance of equity in public policy. When someone comes here from a country where they've never known what it's like to have a fair chance, an equal opportunity, giving them just the basic necessities and rights afforded to you and I as American citizens can change not just their family, but generations to come. And this is why they come to this country. I'll continue to not only help individuals seeking the right to a safe and decent life, but will use the role that I've been afforded within my organization to connect and communicate with local leaders, public officials, continue dialogue with citizens, and stress the importance of equitable policy outcomes for these groups of people. The most impactful module for me throughout this course was difficult to decide. I truthfully loved this class. I loved everything about it, and I truthfully believe that we need equity, we need equality within public policy. However, Module 5 was, I guess, the module that resonated the most with me, as it allowed me to see that achieving public equity in government requires assistance from multiple entities. It's not just going to happen, by one person or one agency. It takes a group effort, utilizing local governments, school districts, health organizations, nonprofits, in order to partner and implement equity-based public policy solutions, and dismantle these systemic barriers to housing in the United States was something that I found fascinating, and I truly believe. Below, you will see I have 3 references that I utilized throughout this PowerPoint. Thank you for your time. Have a good evening